Hello, everyone. I'm Father Alexander Hart,
And I'm Dave Marshall, Rector of All Angels by the Sea, Longboat Key.
and this is a Bridge Between, where we bridge our knowledge of the gospel, we bridge our physical distance. We are bridging some internet speeds today, depending on where
Oh,
you are,
yeah, you brought
and
that up. I'm glad. Yeah,
we are also bridging very shortly our season of Epiphany as we head towards Lent, which is not that far away.
it's not. And actually, you and I were just saying that in some years we would already be in Lent.
Yes,
But I love Epiphany. And imagine if we didn't have today's reading, because Lent would have already started, which means today's reading we never would have heard. So
but it's
that's
kind of a
exciting.
Lenti reading.
It really is. And for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, Lent is a penitential season for the church, and it happens 40 days before Easter. And it's a time when we look about self-examination, and we really take sometimes a hard look at who we are and who we are with God, and we reevaluate our relationships. And it's a very fruitful time. It's not a time where you feel bad about yourself, and people often like give up candy and stuff like that. I mean, which you can, but the real purpose is to do a big self-evaluation. What I find fascinating is that self-evaluation is happening during the season of Epiphany, which is a season of light and season of new information and new thought. And so we're going to run those two things right together, which is kind of fun. And
But
and you're wearing a black shirt and I'm wearing a white shirt, so we're right in it, right? We've got we've
exactly.
got all of these things pulling together.
But I think that this has to be also a season of some evaluation if you're in the season of Epiphany, because if you see the light and you're bathing in the light of Christ, there's going to be some evaluation taking place because you're realizing where the shadows are.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We had some new lighting done in the church, and they were trying to eliminate shadows. And I'm like, can you actually eliminate shadows? And showed you, but
Oh,
those
well,
are lighting people, so they try that. We have today one of the hardest and one
mm-hmm.
of the most misunderstood passages from Luke, or things that Jesus said.
Yep.
Would that be a fair assessment? Would you agree?
I think it would be a fair assessment. I was thinking about this yesterday, and I was thinking the idea of loving your enemies is a concept so foreign to
Well,
us.
before you jump into it, shall we read just the first part?
Well, yeah, yes, go ahead.
All right, very good. And the part that you and I didn't prepare for actually shows up in the second half of what we are covering. But Jesus asks a question, so I thought we would start there. Jesus asks this: if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For sinners love those who love them.
Mm-hmm.
If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Okay, so those are the questions that I think it helps to hear those questions, then hear what Jesus has to say. The way it's written is he says some things and then he asks questions. But he says, if you do good for those who do good to you, what's the big deal there? If you love those who love you, oh, great, right? Well, I love my dog. Oh, wonderful. Good for you.
That was really hard.
But
Yeah.
yeah, right. But let's hear about the really hard things. So this is Luke chapter 6, starting with verse 27. Jesus said, I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. You sure you want to cover this one? I'm starting to think maybe we should switch to a psalm or something.
Well, nobody's asked for my shirt yet, so I'm okay.
Uh, do we wear the same size?
No,
No,
we
I
do
bet
not.
no.
No, our collar sizes are not the same.
You're right. And my
But
wingspan is, yeah.
but
So,
what I would say though is that this reminds me. Let me tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of when I was in my 20s, and I said, "I'm an adult now." you
Okay.
know, and I would say, I make a car payment and I, wash my own clothes and I do all these things for myself. And, one of my family members would pat me on the head and say, well, yeah, welcome to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
That's what adults do. And whenever I think of Jesus, talking about, oh, you love those who love you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of what you're supposed to do anyway,
Right. Right.
kind of like welcome to Christianity, welcome to just being a human being, if you might say. Um,
Right.
you should be
Right.
loving those
Welcome
who
to
love
common
you.
sense.
Yeah, welcome to common sense. But the loving your enemies is something that we find that is unique in Jesus's sayings. And what I find is the concept of love. We have to go back to that Greek word of what he was
Mm-hmm.
talking about. And then we have to
Yeah.
talk about, some of the actions here. So I just want to say one thing briefly, and then I want you to get to your explanation that we talked about before
Mm-hmm.
we pushed record about striking the cheek and the other cheek and stuff, which is loving your enemy and loving those who hurt you is about desiring good for them, desiring the
Right.
best for them.
Right.
It's
Right.
not romantic love. It's not like that. We're not. This isn't Stockholm syndrome. You know,
Mm. Right.
this is about not losing a sense of charity towards others, which I think is one of the first things that we're prone to do, is to say, well, I no longer have to treat that person with any respect or kindness or charity because they are my enemy.
Mm-hmm. And Jesus is giving us a different way to live.
Right.
So I want to go right to the sentence that says, if anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also.
Yep.
This appears in two other gospels as well. And so I would like to reverse some church teaching, which has said, especially for people who are in abusive relationships, that Jesus said to turn the other cheek, so keep taking the abuse. That is absolutely not what Jesus was talking about. This is not what the church stands for. If somebody is harming you and abusing you, you need to get out. Okay. So if I can get that out there first, and then here is why I can say those things confidently, and that in Jesus's day there was a hierarchy or an order, and so if you were working for somebody, say you were working in their household, they could strike you. It happens, and they would do it by taking their right hand. It's right hand only, not left hand. Right hand only, and they wouldn't punch you. They would do a side motion as I'm showing on TV.
Yep.
And unfortunately for those who are listening
Yep.
without watching us,
We
so
call it a
imagine my
back
right
rub.
hand, I'm starting at my left shoulder and I'm swinging to my right. Okay. And so that would hit somebody. Alex, if I were to do that, what side of the cheek would that be?
Well, that would be this cheek right here, I think.
That's your right cheek, right? So when they do that, offer the other also. So if you can offer me other cheek,
Yeah. Turn
that's
my
right.
head.
So keep turning. Keep turning. So Alex is now, I see his profile, and if I were to hit him again, I would hit his nose. Okay. And back in those days, you could only hit somebody in the nose who was your equal. Or if you did punch them in the nose, you made them your equal, either by lowering your status or raising theirs. And so when he says, turn the other cheek, it means that's how you get somebody to stop hitting you. That if they were to hit you again, that then you would change your status or they would change their status. It would be shameful for them to do it that way. And so when he says turn the other cheek, he doesn't mean give them a better shot. He means turn your nose into it so that they won't hit you again. Now, again, you're standing where you are, you're not fighting back, but it's a way of stopping that type of violence. And this type of nonviolent, but also um, the work that Jesus is talking about is something that Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about with sit-ins and things about nonviolent demonstration, and that this is where where they're driving some of that from, is that if you're struck, do something so that they won't strike you again.
I think it's. Thank you for that, because I've not heard that explanation before, and it makes perfect sense, especially when I contemplate the size of my nose. I would be really equal to somebody in the ancient time. But what I think about that is you see my profile, you see where you're going to hit me next.
Hmm.
You're forced to acknowledge you as the aggressor, you as the person who is hitting, is now either to do one of two things. You're forced to either stop or acknowledge my status is equal to you, right? In
That's
essence,
one of the two. Yep.
yeah. And in essence, here, I think what Jesus is getting at is your dignity is not compromised because somebody has hurt you,
Right.
right?
Right.
In fact, you might say that it is them who is lowering themselves by hurting you,
Hmm.
you know. And so when I think about this particular example, it may seem like you're being a pacifist. It may seem like, but Jesus is not lowering the standard by saying, do not return violence for violence. Do not return
Right.
hatred for hatred. Make them see you. Make them
Hmm.
acknowledge the dignity you have in me, in Christ.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
um,
Yep.
but
And
the
if I can build on that for just a second, you made a very good point. That the second one, and anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. This is the idea that in a court of law, in some sort of lawsuit, somebody can actually sue you for your coat, but
yeah,
they cannot sue you for your shirt
right,
because that would be uncovering your nakedness, and the shame would be on the one who uncovered your
yeah,
nakedness. And so if somebody takes your coat, just start taking your shirt off, and then they'll like, stop, wait, don't, right?
right.
That it's a way of stopping that type of behavior.
It's placing
Um,
the burden on the one who is being violent. It's placing the burden on the one who's hurting you.
mhm,
And I think that's what's important is that Christians are not to be the aggressor.
right.
Christians are not to be the one who is doing this, because it's also a warning to you not to do it, to I not to do
Yeah,
that
absolutely. It's a
to
warning.
somebody
Yes.
else. Um,
Yes.
I want to shift gears because there's a question that I think is relevant, and it's one of the questions I'm tackling this Sunday in my sermon. Um,
Okay.
and it goes back to, just to make a comparison, when Jesus talks about the parable of the Good Samaritan,
Okay.
right? And at the end, he asks, when the person asks, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus answers with the parable. What's interesting is that in the parable, the one who is hurt is somebody whom the Jewish people would have kind of not gotten along with, almost been like we would call an enemy, right? The
Right.
Jews and Samaritans did not get along.
No.
But the question becomes, who is my enemy? I wish somebody would have asked that question to Jesus, and we would have gotten
Mhm.
another parable.
Oh, we would have.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, I think because it would have been very helpful. Because, for example, back then, the Jewish people are living in a time when they are occupied by Rome. There's violence against them. There's abuse. All types of
Hmm.
calamities are happening to them. I
Right.
can understand why they considered them to be their enemy,
Right.
right? But today, who is my enemy? I think who is
Hmm.
my enemy sometimes resembles a person who just disagrees with me. My enemy is a person who differs from me politically.
Right.
My enemy is somebody who comments on something I said online. Like
Mm.
these are different things. So I think our concept of what it means to have an enemy also has to change.
I completely agree. And that um, it's so you and I have degrees in political science. And
Mhm.
so we know of times the United States would label somebody as an enemy and then they would become a friend. And then they would become an enemy and then they would become a friend.
Yep.
So the Iran Iraq War, um, things in Central America, that there are just over and over again, um, almost as if there is no such thing as an enemy. There's just a current conflict.
Well, the
So
best way to describe it that I've heard is in statecraft, which is the relationship between states, there are no allies, only common interests.
yeah, exactly. Um, so spiritually speaking, I've never considered this. What would our common interest be? And Jesus may wrap it up with this last sentence: "Do to others as you would have them do to you." That would be perhaps a common interest.
But
That
that's something different though than what we usually see. So, for example, we think about the
okay,
golden rule. You know,
sure,
if you examine this in other religious traditions, Jesus is being more positive. He's being more proactive. Do unto others. In other
Right.
words, as you would have them do unto you first, you making the first move in your behavior. Whereas in some other religious traditions and philosophies, it's kind of like wait to see what they do to you first
Mm,
before you
right.
act.
Right.
But it comes back to that question of who do I really have enemies? I mean, I can't think of somebody who I have as an enemy. There are
Hmm.
people that annoy me. There are people that I
Hmm.
disagree with,
Hmm.
but I can't think of somebody who I would say, well, that person is definitely my enemy. Now, I can't vouch if I'm somebody's enemy. That's up to them. But I hear the language though in our society
Right.
of such over the top descriptions and caricatures of people so that we can make them our enemy. Does that make sense?
Well, there are, with saber rattling and all the type of other, yes, there are ways of creating enemies. There are ways of creating false binaries. There are ways of separating people. And politics does it all the time. This
Oh
isn't
yeah.
just a recent phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's something that people tend to do. You can divide people and you can gain more power, which is strange.
Well, so the example that I want to give in for this Sunday is that I think more often than not, we don't hate people. We hate our image of a person or our caricature of a person. So if you go back to Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life, great movie,
Hmm.
right?
Sure.
Before that, he created a series for the United States government called Why We Fight.
Hmm.
And for those of you who don't know what that series is about, it was getting soldiers ready during World War II who had been drafted or who had signed up, enlisted to understand, why are we in this war? Like, how did we get here? And one of the things they did is they would show the enemies of the United States as these caricatures. So the Japanese were short. They had these thick pebble glasses.
Mm-hmm.
They were mischievous.
Hmm.
It was a caricature. It wasn't actually a real Japanese person is how they looked. But it was easier to create hatred among an enemy by
Hmm.
creating a caricature.
Hmm.
And I still see that today.
Well, we see it in Looney Tunes. There are certain cartoons that they don't show because they are, um,
Wildly
well,
offensive.
um, and just, yeah, and not, well, yeah, just wildly offensive. That those were also ways to get us to rethink, and some of that has to do with World War One. That there was a high percentage of soldiers that when they would head into a fight and they first had the opportunity to pull the trigger and kill somebody they could see on the other side who looked a lot like a member of their own family, they were reluctant to do so. And so
Right.
there are a number of things, and the military is still employing those things about how to increase the percentage of pulling the trigger for the first time. So, uh, boy,
Can
I
I take
never knew we were going to head down this very depressing.
Well, can I what can I
Uh,
what can I take it a step further though?
oh no! Oh
I want to take it one
goodness!
step further before I bring us out of this. And that is
As long as you can bring us out.
we're still
Yep.
doing it today. And
Mm-hmm.
what do I mean by that? Is that if you
Mm-hmm.
look at politics and you look at society and you were to ask, I'll just say it, what does a conservative or a liberal person look like? You're going to get pictures of
Mm-hmm.
caricatures of what people think it looks like. What does a Christian look like versus what does a Muslim or a Jewish person look like? These things are still happening. And the hatred or the animosity that we build up is based off of many times those caricatures. Now, there are sometimes people have negative experiences
Right.
with a particular person, but that doesn't mean the entire group is
Right.
embedded in that.
Right.
Now,
The phrase that, well, all men or all women, right? No,
well,
you've
all of
had
us.
right.
But now to pull us out of that, I think
Mm-hmm.
that what Jesus reminds us again and again is the image of God in other people. And instead of a caricature, it is this authentic image that is burned in, sealed in, embedded in, whatever you want to call it, into our souls that causes us to resemble something that God has created.
Hmm.
And so perhaps the way that we get around these things, the way that we get through the hatred and the conflict, is to find the image of God in that other person.
Hmm. Yeah. Sting wrote a song about the tensions between the Soviets and the United States, and the end of the chorus line is the Russians love their children too. Um, it is this idea of like, look, we're a lot more the same than we are apart,
Well,
and that we can
yeah,
love our children.
yeah, they love blue jeans, I mean,
Right, right.
right. So
So if we can we go back to the love your enemies part?
yeah, go ahead.
All right, because over here. Oh wait, no, did I move it? Oh, it's over here. So I got this little gift, and it had a nice little treat in it for Valentine's Day. And it's is this something that you would give to your enemies because you're supposed to love your enemies?
It depends on whether or not any of the chocolate is poisonous, but okay.
Wow. Um,
That's what you
how
might
I
get them.
interpret
Mhm.
right. How I interpret love your enemies is that I I have a regular and routine prayer life, and when Jesus says, "If you love those who love you, if you do good those who do good to you, what credit?" Often my prayers begin with all of those for whom I love. That's where it begins. Uh, but this is a reminder that for those that you disagree with, for those that you might consider enemies, that we should look at praying for them as well. And one
Yeah.
of the prayers that is used is for someone who was held in captivity as a prisoner of war.
Mm.
That person would think about all of the blessings that he had back home with his family, and all the love that they share, and all of the wonderful memories. And those who were keeping him imprisoned, he would pray that God blesses those captors with the same love and the same joy that he has from his family, that they themselves receive it from their family. One of the hardest prayers to do. But that's along the lines of what Jesus is talking about. And
Absolutely.
so if we have perceived enemies out there, we are not to cut them off and to disregard and to characterize and all that stuff. But instead, um, and this is so hard to do, one way to do it, though, is to say, as you have blessed me, Lord, I need you to bless them.
Well, the reason, and this is kind of going to be part of one of the last things we talk about, but one of the reasons I think this is important is because Martin Luther King knew this, and other great leaders have known this. Love disarms,
It does.
love transforms. And
Mhm.
so imagine some of the worst people in history, and you go back and you study their lives.
Mhm.
They had terrible lives.
They
Many of
did.
them were abused, many of them were neglected, many of them were abandoned. What if they had been shown love from
Mhm.
the beginning? And so I think of people with whom I, excuse me, with whom I disagree, or with people who might consider me an enemy, and I wonder, what would love do in that situation? What would acts of charity and compassion do to a person who may not have felt it before?
Mhm. Um, some would say that Stalin had many enemies. The biggest enemy of Stalin was himself.
Yeah,
Um, this
yeah, yeah.
internal voice that everybody is out to get him,
Mhm.
that he himself was just a tormented person. Now, he tormented many
Millions.
millions of Russian Christians, and just Russians in general,
Just
but
Russians
in
in general.
particular,
Yeah.
yeah, and particularly went after Christians. And I know because the woman who taught me Russian, her father was imprisoned under Stalin, and so um, that is part of where I get this idea from. That when he was in prison, they would gather together, the Russian Christians, they would pray together, and they would pray for Stalin. They would pray for all of the families of those around them, and that they eventually began to pray that first, and then they would pray for their families, and then for their colleagues that are all trapped together.
Well,
And it was releasing them from the hate that poisons the soul. And so it would be easy for them to hate all Russians who are not Christians, but instead they were turning that so that they could have new life within themselves.
well, isn't it like the old saying, hating someone and holding a grudge against them is like drinking poison expecting them to die.
Mm-hmm.
You
But
know,
instead,
poisons
you're
you.
drinking your own poison.
So kind of as a
love,
final-
unity, joy, all of those things are the fountain of youth, and how that comes out from us. And so, for as hard as it is to say, for Jesus to say, bless those who curse you, he had plenty of people cursing him at the time. And then we know, as Luke carries on the story, there will be a lot more.
Absolutely. So I think that for me, my last thought on this is that the call to love one's enemy is twofold.
Okay.
Well, actually threefold. Really, it is meant to transform me. It is meant to pray for the transformation of the person. And through that, it's meant to transform the world.
Okay. I think that's very good. I have another thought, but obviously I looked at the clock, and we'll hold that for Lent.
So it gives us one opportunity, though, for our last thing to be a shameless plug. So remember, Bridging Lent to Easter, it is the outgrowth of this podcast to do a Lenten series. So for those of you clergy who are saying, what am I going to do for Lent? I have not prepared something, or I am too exhausted to prepare something, or I want to try something new. Mm-hmm. This is a free resource. It's going to be hosted at my parish's website. You can go to stjohndivine.com/bridge, and you'll find all the videos there, along with a wonderful ebook that you can download that has all of the guide questions and texts that we're using. And it's going to be available this week. So get on it. If you like it, you can also use it as an individual for personal devotion or in a small group. So this is just a gift that we're giving to you.
Yep. And you can use it both as devotional and in a small group. If you are looking for a small group to join, we have at All Angels, we'll have our Wednesday discussion group doing this at 10 a.m. Eastern. So if you wanted to join a group, we're very friendly, and we join via Zoom. So come on in, and it would be great to have you. It'd be great for you to study that. And then if you still don't know where Alex's church's website is, feel free to like or comment on this page and say, here's my email address, please send it to me. Alex will do it.
And the link will be in the description as well of this video. Okay?
You bet. Yeah.
All right.
Well, Alex, this has been a lot of fun. I started this whole podcast being weighted down by the weight of the world and not internet and all that stuff. But by talking about this, suddenly I feel much better.
I feel better too. And if our only enemy,
I think it's our friendship, really.
Well, if our only enemy is bandwidth, then truly we have conquered all things.
Amen. We have conquered. Well, not we. He has conquered it, and we are with him in his kingdom. So thank you all for listening, and God bless.
All right. We'll catch you in the next one.